Okay, well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. It's really lovely to be here and in all the other places, wherever we all are. And I will not talk a lot about myself. I think you can, Google me if you want to know what I do research-wise. This is just one of the topics that are kind of dear to my academic heart. So let's start right away with the object. This is what we were asked to do, and I think it's a really great way to start a talk. Look at this. So it is an object that I found years ago when I was working in Scotland on a beach. And back then, of course, I took this because it looked really weird. And I didn't know that it would become quite important a few years later, because essentially what it is, and why I took this for this talk, think about it as an amalgam, a blend of nature and culture, or nature and technology, right? We like to think about the two usually as binaries, something that is separate from one another. But in fact, they're always deeply interconnected. So in other words, you could think of there is no technology and no culture without nature. So this thing is not a rock. These are shells that are kind of blended into something that looks like a metal alloy. So the beach where I found it was also next to a post-industrial site in Dundee, which is a very post-industrial city. So it kind of really represents this really strong blend between technology and nature. And games, as we know, have a lot to do with technology. So I will pass this around as I will talk. Feel free to, touch the ground. So, where's the problem? I mean, we've heard from Patrick there are many problems. And I think we not only share, the rock and the fact that we know each other, but I guess also from Patrick's talk, we share a lot of similar views on that point. So let me start my story with this, by saying that video games are not only objects of culture. This is something that is quite clear to most of us. But they also are objects of nature. And that sounds a little bit weirder. And how, So as virtual and immaterial, as clean as they are portrayed within the framework of post-industrial capitalism, they are literally made out of natural resources. That's not a surprise in my talk, because you saw the slides from the previous presentation by Patrick. But they are made of natural resources and material labor. So, they also rely on technologies and the dynamics of production that make those media possible in the first place. So we think of them as, those magical objects in the cloud. But, navigating, it's a complex topic, and navigating all those complexities of, material, economic, social, cultural interdependencies in relation to sustainability, it can be extremely challenging. For makers, for researchers, for students, is like, the question is always, where do I start, or where do we start? And I thought, perhaps the first important step is to, and that's why I rely on that quote, one of my favorite ones actually, is to break the enchantment that inflames the passion for media technologies, and aka the passion for video games. By breaking the enchantment, I don't want to say that we stop playing, or that we should stop playing, or we should stop making games, but maybe it's the first step to realize actually what is at stake. So, games are usually seen as those magical objects. They're magical objects, and their materiality usually remains hidden behind playful interfaces and shiny screens. This is what we usually think of. This is what we usually see, or what we usually touch. So the story of disenchantment, what would that mean? What does it mean to, disenchant a video game? We could find a lot of different starting points for that. And the story could look like this. So disenchanting technology and video games can be done by telling stories of resource extraction and exploitation, uncomfortable stories, of enslaving work and artisanal cobalt miners, and artisanal here is not, it's not a nice word. Those miners are also including children. This is a cover of the book, relatively recent, about cobalt mines. And anything that has a lithium battery, meaning any gaming device, also any smartphone, is relying on the resource that is dug out from those cobalt mines. This story of disenchantment can also start with this. So we can think of the overwhelming production and consumption of data. We consume a lot. These are just a few examples, and they're already a couple of years old. It's almost unbelievable how much we consume. But those things that we consume, the data, it's not hanging in the clouds. It's a real and material thing. So I'm actually, starting with this object that you are all hopefully now kind of holding in your hands. I want to kind of ground my talk in the materiality of the medium. So the clouds that support all the content look more like this, right? So the story of disenchantment is also the story of archiving and flowing increasing amounts of data. And they are, traveling as electrical impulses. They need energy to travel. And data centers have been described by Greenpeace as the factories of the digital age. And here are, I'm not going to read it out, and this is also almost unbelievable to actually realize, but that's another take on how much data we consume and we produce. It's going in exabytes by now, and this is also a figure from 2019. Okay, so the question is, why is it important? Why is it important to think about this, material dimension, or to disenchant the medium a little bit? Well, I would like to think that thinking about the material dimension of the medium is actually shifting our attention to the planet Earth, and it actually shows how direct that connection is. It's not that far away as we may think. And the other question is, it's even more important, what can we do about it? Well, usually, and I teach a lot on what you may call eco-critical game studies or eco-critical game design, usually the question from the students is, what can I do about it? I think that's also, and that connects me back to Patrick, not what I can do about it, first what we can do about it. And I have here, 2 points that I would like to raise. So, first, be aware, as players, as makers, and really, most importantly, as citizens. And second, we act collectively and we share the resources. And here are a couple of examples of this kind of collective action. And these are just a few. And let me focus very briefly on the third one, because that leads us to my research project. So in this project that's called Greening Games, a couple of institutions, including Cologne Game Lab, TH Köln, Breda University, University of Turku, and Charles University, we are collaboratively designing and testing didactic content that focuses on, eco-critical game studies and game development. So we think it's actually really essential to think even like one step before. Our students, and one of our students also sitting in the first row, which is great to see. They will be joining the games industry soon. Some of them are already part of the games industry. And it is also kind of a cultural change that is happening right now, a cultural shift. So new generations are coming, and they're much more aware of the fact that we need to do something about it, and that the industry is also has to take kind of different cultural values. If you don't know yet much about all those different ways in which games are connected to sustainability, I can send you with this QR code to a report that we have written. It's about 80 pages, and half of it is devoted to the industry, so I guess that will be a little bit more thank you. That will be a little bit more relevant to game makers. Half of it is related to the education. So the question, well, not only how do we teach, but it's like what do we teach when we talk about games and sustainability? And here, a couple of let's say, 4 perspectives. So we try to break it down because it's so complex, and we are working with 4 categories. Think about them as 4 pockets into which different types of themes or topics can be put into. So let me just unpack them very briefly. Games infrastructures. That's essentially a lot of the topics that have to do with what I have shown you at the beginning. So looking at games as objects of nature, looking at material resource extraction, reading maybe on the fact that media, digital media and technology those media are finite. They're not infinite because the resources are not infinite. All those things, anything that we're holding here, the laptop that I'm presenting on, all those things they are technology, but they're nature. They all require resource extraction to be built. The second one that we are working with is the game cultures. So these are topics around games as objects of culture. So games, of course, can carry cultural values, right? There are examples of games that deal with sustainability on a thematic level. So that's more on the game culture side of things. But then the students that we very often teach are students that actually develop and design games. And these are very different questions. So the question of game production, for instance, how games are products that are developed according to different workflow processes. So basically, the question here would be, what does it mean to make a video game, in a more sustainable way? How to change the production processes? I don't know, should we measure should we measure how much energy our game engine is game engine needs in order to run the game? Should we be coding maybe in a more optimized and sustainable way, and so on and so forth. And then finally, the game's content or game design. And this is very close to game cultures as well, right? So then the question is, well, if games are systems that are designed with ecological messages and values, how do I do it as best as I can as a designer? What should I know about? How do I design those games? And why do I do it? To raise awareness, to change people's behaviors? Can games actually do that in the first place? So those 4 thematic areas are what we're working with, and around those 4 thematic areas we're building those, this didactic content. I guess if you're a game maker, you could think about it like, what if your company offered workshops that kind of would prepare you to either code more sustainably or know how to develop and design games that communicate about ecology and as well as they can. So so that's the report, and inside of it you will be able to find a lot of different materials that will take you, these are just a couple of examples. So these all have to do with the materiality of the medium. But the materials that we have there, and we're also curating a huge list of literature on Zotero. The materials that we have are not only academic texts, we're also looking for really good and reliable journalism, and of course reports by Greenpeace. It is vital to have a look, of course, at what industry is producing, but it's not enough to read the industry reports because, I don't know, ... I think we know. So, to end this presentation, I think usually the bigger problem is that on the one hand we have games that are media that rely on the extraction of resources, and that's a very a very depressing thing to realize. On the other hand, all those uplifting messages of games as media that carry ecological messages, games that can shift culture values and bring change, both are true. They seem kind of contradictory. And funny enough, in the latest report, which came out, I think, just maybe 2 weeks ago by the Playing for the Planet Alliance, this concern, or let's say this disparity, it's actually visible as well in their report. And Also, as means of kind of bringing it to the end, this is one of the most surprising things that I have heard from a person who was leading a major video game in a AAA studio. I was not expecting to hear that in an interview, but there I was, listening to a gameplay director of Writers Republic saying we need to do politics and we need to find a balance of how to do it. So I think this is also for us academics a good example, because it shows us not only that there's this industry out there, which is of course propelled by money. At the end of the day, everybody wants to make a profit. But there are also people there, and in the AAA industry too, that actually do deeply care and that lead very ecological lives, and they do try to change it from within. So that's, I guess, a very positive message. And this game was mentioned as well. It kind of brings my presentation to the end, because it's a game that was actually made for mobile phones and about the materiality of the medium. So it was a game that was kind of showing what is behind the production of a mobile phone. And here you have a screenshot from the game that represents child labor. The game was taken down very quickly from App Store back then. So games can be, quite powerful political, I guess, tools as well. They can make a point. And I guess that game brings us back to my magical object here. So technology and nature are deeply intertwined. And with that, I will end and pass on to the next speaker. I'll take my object.